The letter was still sitting on the kitchen counter when I woke up that Tuesday morning. I'd written it 3 weeks earlier, never sent it, and somehow couldn't bring myself to throw it away either. It just sat there next to the fruit bowl, folded in half, with my daughter's name on the front in my handwriting. I made my coffee the way I always do. 2 scoops, a splash of oat milk, no sugar, since my doctor started giving me that look at every checkup. I stood at the window and watched the neighbor's dog pull its leash toward a squirrel that had absolutely no intention of running, and I thought about the cruise. Not the one that was coming up, the one my husband and I had always talked about taking. He passed 8 years ago, pancreatic cancer. 11 weeks from diagnosis to the end, which the doctor said was fast and merciful, and I suppose I understand what he meant by that, but mercy doesn't feel like the right word when you're the one left behind holding a hospital parking stub and a plastic bag of your husband's belongings. We had planned a cruise for our 40th anniversary, Alaska. We'd talked about it for years. The glaciers, the quiet, the kind of cold that makes you feel awake in your chest. We never made it. There was always something. His mother's health, then my knee surgery, then the grandkids' schedules, then just life doing what life does, which is move forward whether you're ready or not. So when I decided on a Thursday afternoon in my living room in Savannah that I was going to book that cruise anyway, it felt like something I owed myself. Something I owed him too, in a way I can't fully explain. I'm 68 years old. I worked as a registered nurse for 31 years. I raised 2 children, largely on my own, after my husband's first heart attack left him unable to work for a stretch that turned into most of a decade. I know what it is to stretch a paycheck. I know what it is to say no to yourself for so long that you forget what yes feels like. After he died, I started putting money aside, not a lot at first. $50 a month, sometimes $100 when I could manage it. I kept it in a separate savings account I opened specifically for this purpose. I labeled it in my phone contacts as the Alaska Fund. It took me 5 years to save enough to feel like I could do it right, not budget travel, not a tiny interior cabin with a porthole the size of a dinner plate. I wanted a veranda. I wanted to sit outside in the cold air with a blanket and a cup of tea and watch the glaciers move. By the time I'd saved enough, the fund had grown to just over $22,000. Some of it I'd earned. Some of it came from a small inheritance from my aunt who passed the year before. I didn't spend it on the roof repair, even though the roof needed it. I didn't spend it on my daughter's basement renovation, even though she asked. I said no politely and moved on. That money had one purpose. My daughter is 51 years old. She lives about 40 minutes from me, in a nice neighborhood outside Savannah that she and her husband moved to when the kids were small. I love her. I want to be clear about that, because what I'm about to tell you is not a story about not loving your child. It is a story about learning too late and too slowly that love and self-erasure are not the same thing. She has 2 boys, 19 and 23. Her husband, who I will call my son-in-law because that is what he is, works in commercial real estate. He is the kind of man who speaks in a way that makes you feel slightly corrected even when you haven't said anything wrong. I had never fully trusted him, but I had always been polite, because that is what you do. You are polite. You keep the peace. You tell yourself that your daughter is happy, and that is what matters. When I told her about the cruise, she lit up in a way that made my heart full. She hugged me and said it was perfect timing, that the boys were at ages where they'd really appreciate it, that it would be a beautiful memory for the family. She asked if she could look at the itinerary. That was March. The cruise was booked for September. 7 nights. Norwegian Cruise Line, round trip from Seattle, up through the Inside Passage, Juneau, Skagway, Glacier Bay. I put down deposits for 4 cabins, 1 for me, 1 for my daughter and son-in-law. One for my older grandson and the girlfriend he'd been with for 2 years. One for my younger grandson, $19,000 charged to the travel account I had set up specifically for this booking. I kept all the confirmation numbers in a folder on my desktop, labeled by name. My son-in-law asked about 2 weeks after I'd made the bookings whether the cabin he and my daughter had been assigned came with a veranda. I told him it did. He said good. But was it an ocean view veranda or a covered veranda? Because on the website it looked like it might be partially obstructed. I told him I'd chosen the best available in the category I'd booked and that it had a clear view. He said he'd look into it. I should have paid more attention to what that meant. The summer passed the way summers do when you're counting down to something. I ordered a new winter coat. I bought good wool socks, the kind that cost more than they should, but actually keep your feet warm. I started reading about Glacier Bay, the history of it, the way the ice has retreated over 200 years, the wildlife you might see if you're quiet enough. I read about a couple who spotted a humpback whale breach within 50 feet of their ship and said they stood there for a full minute without speaking. That's what I wanted, that quiet, that fullness. In July, I got an email from Norwegian. A standard notification, changes to booking preferences, had been saved. I assumed it was something routine, an upgrade request, a dining preference. I didn't look closely at it. In August, I got another one. This one had a different cabin number in it. I pulled up the booking portal. My son-in-law had changed their cabin. Not just changed it, upgraded it to a 2-room suite on the deck above, a haven suite, the kind that costs what some people pay for a month's rent. The difference in price, the upgrade cost, had been charged to the travel account, the account that held my Alaska fund. He had saved the card details from the original booking and used them to cover the difference. $1,140, gone from my account without a word to me. I sat at my kitchen table for a very long time. I am not a woman who cries easily. I went through my husband's illness without falling apart in front of anyone, because there were things to manage and people to hold together, and crying, for me, has always felt like something I do alone. But that afternoon I cried, not because of the money exactly. $1,100, while not nothing, was not what broke me. What broke me was the assumption, the absolute certainty on his part that this was acceptable, that my account, my money, my fund that I had built, dollar by dollar over 5 years, was available to him. That he could reach into it and take what he wanted, and I would simply absorb it. I thought about calling my daughter first. Then I thought about what she would say. She would say he must have misunderstood. She would say he probably thought it would be fine. She would say, "Mom, don't make this into a whole thing." I'd heard those words before, about other things. Don't make this into a whole thing. I didn't call her. Instead, I opened a new browser tab and read the terms and conditions of my travel account for about 45 minutes. Then I called the travel agency I'd booked through, a woman named Frances who I'd worked with before and who I genuinely liked. I explained the situation calmly. I said that a charge had been made to my account without my authorization. Frances was professional and kind and did not ask unnecessary questions. She said that as the account holder, I had full authority over all bookings tied to it. I said I understood. Then I asked her to walk me through my options. I didn't do anything that night. I made dinner. I watched a little television. I called my friend Harriet, who is 73 and sharp as a tack and has been my closest friend since we worked together on the same hospital floor for 12 years. I didn't tell her everything, but I told her enough, and she listened in the way that only a person who has known you for a long time can listen, without filling the silence, without rushing to fix it. She said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I haven't decided yet." She said, "Well, when you do, I'll support it." That's the kind of friend she is. The next morning, I called my daughter. I told her plainly that I had seen the charge, that the upgrade had been made without my knowledge or consent, that $1,140 had been taken from my account. There was a pause. Then she said, "He mentioned he was going to look into a nicer room. I thought he had his own card on file." I said, "He used mine." Another pause. Then, "Mom, I'm sure he didn't mean any harm. He probably just got confused during the checkout process." I said, "Honey, this is not a checkout confusion. There were multiple confirmation screens. He would have seen my card number." She went quiet. Then, carefully, "I'll talk to him." That was a Tuesday. By Thursday, I had not heard back. I texted her. She said they'd talked and he felt terrible about it and he would transfer me the money. He did not transfer the money. By the following Monday, I sent her a text and asked when I could expect to see the transfer. She said he'd been busy with a work deal and would get to it by the weekend. He did not transfer the money by the weekend. At some point, and I'm not proud of how long it took me to reach this point, but I'm telling you the truth, I stopped waiting. I sat down with my laptop and I looked at what I had in front of me. 4 cabin bookings, a travel account in my name, a cruise in 3 weeks that I had spent 5 years saving for, and a daughter whose husband had helped himself to my money and whose response, when confronted, had been to say he felt terrible and then do absolutely nothing. And I thought about all the other times I had swallowed things. The basement renovation I'd paid $2,000 toward, even though I'd said no. The birthday party for my younger grandson, where I'd covered everything and received a thank you text 3 days later. The Christmas I'd driven 4 hours in the rain because they couldn't come to me, and I had said it was fine, and it was fine because I kept making it fine. When did I start making everything fine? I called Frances again. I told her I needed to make some changes to the bookings. I removed my son-in-law and daughter from their cabin. I removed the upgrade he had charged to my account and requested a reversal. Then I made 2 new bookings, one for Harriet and one for my friend Yvonne, who had lost her husband 2 years earlier and hadn't been anywhere since. I did not call my daughter to tell her. I waited. She called me 4 days before the cruise. She said she'd gotten an email from Norwegian saying their cabin booking had been canceled. I said, "Yes, I canceled it." The silence on the other end of the line was the loudest silence I have ever heard. She said, "Mom, what?" I said, "The money was never returned. I waited 3 weeks. I gave every reasonable opportunity. I've decided to use the cabin for someone else." She said, "You can't just, this is a family trip." I said, "It is. Harriet and Yvonne are family to me. They've been family to me for over 30 years. She said my son-in-law's name like it was a defense, like saying his name proved something. I said, "I know, and I hope you two have a wonderful September." She said some other things. Some of them were unkind. She said I was being vindictive. She said I was punishing her for something her husband did. She said she defended me to him countless times, and this was how I treated her. I let her say all of it. I didn't interrupt. I didn't argue. When she finished, I said, "I love you. I'll talk to you when things have settled." And I ended the call. I won't tell you that felt easy. It didn't. I sat in my living room afterward with my hands folded in my lap, and I thought about her as a little girl, the way she used to fall asleep in the car with her cheek against the window. I thought about driving her to college and crying all the way home on I-16. I thought about everything I had carried for that child and how much of it I had carried quietly, without asking for anything back. Love doesn't disappear because you decide to protect yourself. That's the thing they don't tell you. It doesn't go anywhere. It just changes shape. The morning we left for Seattle, I met Harriet at the airport at 6:15. She had a new carry-on she was very proud of, navy blue with gold zippers, and she wheeled it up to me like she was arriving somewhere important. Yvonne was already at the gate. wearing a fleece vest and holding 2 coffees, one of which she handed me without being asked. I cannot tell you how that felt. I can only tell you that I stood there in that terminal with bad airport lighting and the smell of a Cinnabon somewhere nearby, and I thought, this is what it's supposed to feel like. We flew to Seattle and took a car to the pier. The ship was larger than I'd expected. They always are in person. I stood on the dock and looked up at it and felt something crack open in my chest in the good way, the way that means something is beginning rather than ending. Our cabin had a veranda. I had made sure of that. On the second night, somewhere north of Vancouver Island, I put on my new coat and my good wool socks, and I went out to stand on the veranda by myself. The water was dark and flat, and there were stars in a way you don't see in Georgia. The air was cold enough to sting, but the kind of sting that makes you breathe deeper, not the kind that makes you want to go inside. I thought about my husband. I thought about the trip we never took. I thought about whether he would have liked the cold, which he would not have, honestly. He was a man who put on a sweater in October and didn't take it off until April. I thought about how much I had loved him and how much that love had quietly become the frame around everything I did for 34 years. I didn't cry. I just stood there. The next morning in Juneau, the 3 of us rented rain jackets from a shop near the dock and took a float plane out over the Mendenhall Glacier. We sat in a plane smaller than any I'd ever been in, and when it banked low over the ice, Harriet grabbed my arm and said something I couldn't hear over the engine, but I understood anyway. Some things don't need words. Yvonne cried a little on the way back, and she apologized for it, and Harriet said, "Honey, if you're not crying, you weren't paying attention." And that was that. My daughter called once while we were at sea. I let it go to voicemail. She said she hoped I was having a good time. She sounded careful, the way people sound when they are still deciding whether they're sorry or whether they're just sorry they got caught. I have learned after 68 years that those are not the same thing, and I can usually tell the difference. I listened to the voicemail once. Then I set my phone face down on the nightstand and went to dinner with my friends. My son-in-law never transferred the money. I filed a dispute with my bank when I got home, and the $1140 was returned to my account within 10 business days. It turns out that when you're the account holder and you can document that a charge was made without authorization, the bank tends to take your side. I do not know whether he was ever told this happened. I did not ask. My daughter and I have spoken since then. Things are different in ways that I think may be permanent. She wants everything to go back to how it was, and I understand that impulse, I do, but I am not sure how it was is a place I want to return to. I spent a very long time making things easy for everyone around me. I am not sure that served anyone as well as I thought it did. What I know is this. I stood on the deck of a ship in Glacier Bay on a Thursday morning in September, and I watched a glacier. Not a photograph of one, not a video. The actual ice, blue-white and ancient and absolutely indifferent to all of us, calving slowly into water that had been there since before anyone alive could remember. A piece broke off while we were watching, not a dramatic crash, just a quiet separation, and the 3 of us stood together at the railing without speaking. I thought about the letter still sitting on my kitchen counter, the one I'd written to my daughter and never sent. I had thought about it as unfinished business, something I owed her, maybe, some explanation she deserved. Standing there watching the ice, I decided I didn't need to send it. She knows what she did, he knows what he did, and I know what I did. I booked a trip, I paid for it, I went. And I stood at the edge of that water with the people who had shown up for me, and I let the cold air fill my lungs, and for the first time in longer than I can say, I was not managing anyone else's comfort. I was just there. There's a moment in this story that I keep coming back to, and it's not the one you'd expect. It's not when I saw the charge on my account. It's not when my daughter told me not to make it a whole thing. It's earlier than that. It's the moment I almost didn't book the trip at all. When I sat with my laptop open and thought, maybe this is too much money to spend on yourself. Maybe you should wait and see what the family wants to do. I almost talked myself out of my own dream again. That's the part that gets me, because what my son-in-law did was wrong. There's no softer way to put it. He used my account without asking. He helped himself to something that wasn't his, and when he was caught, he did nothing. No apology that meant anything. No transfer. Just silence and the quiet expectation that I would absorb it the way I had absorbed everything else for 30 years. But I had been making it easy for people to treat me that way for a long time. Every time I said yes when I meant no. Every time I called it keeping the peace when really I was just keeping myself small. Every time I handed over money or time or the front seat of my own life and called it love. That's not love. I know that now. Real love, the kind worth giving and worth receiving, doesn't ask you to disappear inside it. What I did when I called Francis and changed those bookings wasn't revenge. I want to be clear about that. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I was simply, for the first time in longer than I can account for, doing the thing that was right. And right required me to think clearly, not just feel deeply. It required me to look at what was actually happening, not what I wished was happening, not what I was willing to pretend was happening, and make a decision based on that reality. That's harder than it sounds. It's one thing to know something. It's another to act on what you know when acting on it means disappointing people you love. It means sitting with the discomfort of their anger. It means tolerating the silence after you said your piece and hung up the phone. I sat with all of it, and I didn't collapse. I don't think I could have done that 10 years ago. Honestly, I'm not sure I could have done it 5 years ago. It took me a long time to understand that strength isn't about never feeling afraid or uncertain. It's about feeling all of that and still doing the right thing anyway. It's about having enough respect for yourself to believe that your money, your plans, your life, these things matter. You matter. Not more than anyone else, but not less either. Standing on that veranda in Glacier Bay with Harriet and Yvonne, I wasn't thinking about my daughter or my son-in-law. I was thinking about my husband and how much he would have hated the cold, and how much I loved him for 40 years, and how much of myself I had poured into every relationship in my life without stopping to ask whether the container was worth pouring into. Some containers hold what you give them, some don't. Wisdom is learning to tell the difference before you've emptied yourself out. I didn't go to Alaska to prove a point. I went because I had earned it, in every sense of that word. And when the ice broke off into that water, quiet and unhurried, I understood something I can't fully explain. That some separations are not losses. Some of them are just long overdue.